Hey guys, this is Tyler here. It is Wednesday evening, and I'm going to discuss here why I believe that the public transportation system in Chile was and is overpriced. Okay, so we'll go back in time here, and I was living in Chile in South America from 2013 until 2015. And when I was there was two main methods of transportation. There was a bus system. It was known as the micro. It was like a small bus. I was in a port city on the coast. It was called Viña del Mar. There's another well-known city called Valparaiso. Santiago is like 100 kilometers east of these port cities, and it kind of in the valley. The other system was the subway system in Santiago for people that were there. Understand that in Santiago, their bus system's a little different than the micro system in Viña del Mar. In Viña del Mar, at the time that I was living there, the micro kind of bus system was approximately 340 pesos for a bus ride to essentially go across town. Yeah, there were fares though that were more and some were less. 340 Chilean pesos currently is around 50 cents. Now, when I was there, it was actually closer to 70 cents. This was a pretty standard rate. For the subway system, on the other hand, in Santiago, the normal fare, the non-student fare, was I believe around 600 Chilean pesos, which at the time was like $1.10 or $1.15. It was expensive for the average person there. I always noticed this when I was there. I would sometimes visit the capital, and I would always be amazed at how expensive the subway system was in Santiago. It's very interesting, the history here and how the metro fares are calculated. Now, understand that in most of the world, the metro or subway systems are funded partially through the government. They're subsidized, and especially when we look at Argentina. My brother lived in Argentina for about 4 years, which neighbors Chile. When my brother lived in Argentina during the same time, we'll say 2013, 2014, in this situation, in Argentina, with the exchange from the Argentinian peso, it worked out to around 25 or 30 cents for a metro or subway fare, which is, if you figure out, it was like a third or like a quarter of what the subway fare in Santiago was. So you could just see here it was highly subsidized in Argentina, and that doesn't factor in special rates for students or children or senior citizens. So this just kind of shows the difference here. And in many other cities around the world that have subsidized subway systems, it's adjusted. And many of the subway systems in America, it's not as well subsidized, so it can be kind of expensive, like in New York or Washington, D.C. Relative though to the incomes, it was quite expensive. And the same was so of the bus system. This micro system in Viña in Valparaiso was expensive for the average person. Many people had to use this bus system 5 days a week. It was not cheap. And why was this? Because it was mostly private run. It was like business/corporation. And they would kind of set their own rates. It was very intense also for the drivers. These guys, as they called them down there, conductores, I believe, these guys were very pressed often to be to meet their deadlines, to be at the location that they were supposed to be at, and they would often work the many hours, and they didn't receive great pay. It was decent, but it wasn't great. A lot of the revenue here basically went straight to the top, and it was noticeable by the stress and behavior of some of these drivers. It also kind of made me question the importance of having these kind of areas publicly run, government run, rather than privately run enterprises, because it didn't really, there were two parties that it didn't exactly serve too well, and that would be both the passengers who had to pay somewhat elevated fares, and also the drivers who, relative to the amount of work they were doing, they weren't being paid as well as they should have been. This is just an example of how a public transportation system is sometimes the best way to go. Santiago, the system there was a little more public, but still it wasn't very subsidized. It was still very much run like a corporation, run like a business. And if anyone knows anything about the history of Chile, they had a lot of influence back in the 1980s coming from the U.S. and from the city of Chicago. There were well-known economists that essentially overhauled the system, and many areas were privatized, including transportation. This to this day is showcased in areas like transportation and in their country. It was often even worse in Santiago with their subway system. The subways were even more expensive than the micros. And in Santiago, the standard of living greatly varies from person to person. The people on the lower spectrum make a lot less than people on the higher spectrum. So the rates that the people who would actually be using the subway primarily should have been paying less, because you figure that people beyond a certain threshold wouldn't probably be using the subway very frequently. And so there was kind of a mismatch here in fare rates. So this was a very common complaint that I've experienced from people when I was down there about the elevated cost of the subway system. And like the micro system, Vinia, it was privatized. It was privatized to a degree, and it was also run more like a corporation. It wasn't subsidized like other transportation systems such as Argentina, which contributed to its high cost. Now, the other problem was the infrastructure had recently been totally redeveloped and constructed there, and it was a very new system they had installed. So they were having to try to pay for all the costs that have been incurred, or debts that were incurred to build this whole system, this network that in Santiago. It's not to say that the subway system was awesome, honestly, in Santiago. It was a great system for South America, and it was very efficient, and it was a solid quality transportation system. Also in Vinia with the microbus system, while this wasn't quite as comfortable, this was something very much associated and attached to the culture of Chile. And with both of these systems, it did very much serve most of the people. Most of the people were able to utilize and benefit from the system. The main thing here, I think, is that Chile really needs to figure out a way to lower the cost of their bus system and their train system to make it more suitable for people. Just keep in mind here that the rates that I mentioned were like 5 or 6 years ago. These rates most likely have gone up at least 50%, maybe more. And also note that the inflation in Chile has gone up a lot in the past 2 or 3 years. So this I know for certain the subway system in Santiago has gone up a lot since that point, from the price points that I mentioned. And this is the state of their economy there. So there's definitely things to be improved. Hopefully in the future they can figure out how to subsidize this system, potentially have something like what Estonia has, where they've been able to eliminate the cost of most public transportation in Tallinn, in the capital here. Time will tell on this, and I look forward to all the feedback below, and thank you.